if it's just question answer, that's not a good opposition. That's not a good discussion. We have to see that the opponent understands the question and can show whether the answer was good or wrong. So if the opponent asks, so how did you measure the velocity? And the answer would be with this and this way. The opponent should say, okay, I agree this is the good way. Or it should be, okay, but don't you think if you would do it differently, then it would be much more precise? Or do you really want to claim that with this measurement of velocity you obtain this precision what you claim? So you should understand that the question is because the opponent wants to know something and not only just to fill in time and go further. And very important for some of the jurors, like expressing opponents' ideas about answers of the reporter is not a presentation of the own solutions. Even concerning the experiment. Like if you ask, what did happen if, I don't know, we put down the ball into the foam and the reporter said, this and this happened, and if the opponent says, I don't really think this one happens, that's not a presentation of the own solution. That there's a scientific discussion, and we have to allow the opponent to discuss also like the experimental facts. And don't subtract points if it comes to discussion of the experimental facts. Review. Most of the jurors, especially like less experienced jurors, have big problem in fair judging of the review. So think about that the review has to be full of information and not just empty words. So again, citing from the guidelines, it should give an objective summary of the performances of the both reporter and opponent. So the reviewer should speak about both what was in the presentation, what he thinks about the opposition, and how about the discussion. Important topics presented together with the reviewer's personal, non-trivial opinion. This is the thing which is really should be much more highlighted maybe on the slide. It's not the role of the reviewer to repeat what was said by the opponent and the reporter. The role of the reviewer is to state his or her opinion about what was said. So, the reporter performed this kind of experiment. The opponent questioned the validity of the experimental data. And we think that the reporter done the best he could, and the opponent was not really correct in questioning the data because we believe this was a proper thing that has to be done. And also, the same with the opponent, the reviewer has to demonstrate that he understands what was going on. If the reviewer, for instance, does not touch with any single word the theory that was discussed, it is a signature that the reviewer does not understand what was going on, cannot judge it, and that's a minus point for the reviewer for sure. If you heard like nice presentations, good experiments, interesting theory, that should end up with the lowest grade, with 1 point. That's nothing. You can write it about every single presentation. And I could put down here a few reviews I have seen last year, which could fit on any presentation you can imagine. And I have seen jurors giving 6 or 7 points for that because there was nothing wrong. You don't judge whether there is something wrong. You judge the content. And if there is nothing interesting, then you don't give points for that. So you should not expect phrases, but clear statements. I just wrote down something which came to my mind during today's morning. Like, experimental measurement of magnetic force was nice. So if this is true, if you agree, that's a nice statement. But if you think that was a complete nonsense, then of course you subtract. But this is a clear statement, you can agree or not. Measurement of velocity was imprecise and biased, or theory for laminar flow is not suitable for this problem. These kind of are clear statements of the reviewer. You can agree or not. If you agree, you have your points. If you disagree, you don't have your points. But if there is nothing like that, you have to be very low. Don't forget the opponent should be also reviewed. So the review should not be another opposition just touching the report again. And what's very important, and sometimes jurors forget about this, be consistent if you're judging of the presentation, opposition, and discussion. For instance, if you think the presentation was very poor and you end up with 4 points, and the reviewer said it was a very nice presentation with a good theory, nice experiments, clear connection between theory and experiments, if you don't agree, you should give also little points to the reviewer. So you should not give a lot of points to a reviewer who is very positive about the presentation if you are not positive with the presentation. If you are confident with your ideas. That would be something like a standard presentation, what to expect. So for physics, you add or subtract. So you start up with 5 points, if this is a standard. So you add or subtract 3 points for physics, which would be correctness and relevance of the physics on the first place. Scientific approach, whether the way they are treating experiments and theory is, let's say, scientific and reasonable. Whether they understand what they are doing. Whether the conclusions they derive are valid. Whether the theory and experiment done can lead to the conclusions they present. And also whether they are able to answer the answers from the opponent, reviewer, jury members. For the presentation, you just have plus and minus 1 point. This is just the thing you can add when you see a very nice, clear, understandable presentation with a very nice overall impression, with nice slides, on-site experiment, whatever. Add the point. If you don't understand the word the person is speaking because his language is very poor, his slides are ununderstandable and chaotic, you can subtract a point, but not much more. So we are not, it's not a dancing competition, it's a physics competition. For the reporter, you judge, I just run through it, the quality, structure, explanation, appropriateness, novelty, references, discussion. I just touched references. It's very important. We have some of the problems are really complicated, and the reasonable way to solve it is to start with some work that has been done before. But it's very important to state exactly this is work we have taken from papers, and this is our work. These are videos, photographs, graphs taken from journals, books, and this is our work. If this is not done, then it's very sad because you can't really judge what is the work by the team and what is just reading and explaining. The opponent, it's very important that he or she responds to the reporter's solution. The opponent should find shortcomings of errors on the first place, of course, because this is the criticism we expect. But the opponent should be also able to counter strong sides, which was good, which was fine. The question should be relevant and nice. Normally it's like if after the presentation, normally you have a few questions in your mind. If the opponent comes with similar or the same questions, it's good. If you end up with having the same questions on your mind after the opposition and the review, then probably it was not the best that could be done. Of course, clear statements and polemic about what was said by the reporter he has to discuss and discussion. And for the reviewer, again, the most important thing: express his own opinion about topics presented and discussed. And this is a bit unclear point for the reviewer. To what extent the reviewer is expected to bring new things that were not discussed before? And there is no clear answer for that. It's on your judgment. If you feel that the reporter and both reporter and opponent missed a very important part of the problem, and the reviewer opened this problem, then it's a plus point. But if it was a nice presentation with nice discussion, and the reviewer puts down a few new things which are very minor and were not discussed during the presentation opposition, then it's rather minus. Because that's not the role of the reporter, bring new things unless they are crucially important for the problem. Missing parts. Do not punish missing parts if it's not appropriate. So for instance, like you have a point for answers in your scoring sheet, like were the answers correct or not. If there were no questions, you should not punish them for not giving answers. That's obvious. Like you should not punish the opponent that he did not came with any praise if you feel there was no reason and the presentation was very poor. You should not really punish that there is no quantitative theory experiment link if you feel it's not possible for the problem. And you also should not punish missing understanding of math if there was no math, or if you feel the level of math was too high to understand. Important thing, low grades again. So the new guidelines should shift you down, your grades down compared to 2010 and earlier. So don't be afraid to be 3. 3 is still a reasonable grade. It's 1/3 of the points, or even 2 or 1. So I don't want to push you really to the low grades. But think about that. If you are really biased from the middle, then you lose your freedom going up. If a mean presentation is between 7 and 8, you don't really have the freedom to praise a very, very nice presentation. But on the other hand, it's also important. Please don't come in the afternoon and just start with 5s for everything you see. So it's not fair for the good teams and neither for the bad teams. So it's not your role to start with 5 with everything you see today. But think about that you should have enough freedom going up without. But even today, if you feel for this particular problem, I have no idea what else could be done, then just take a 9 or 10. No problem. But think about if it's like it's reasonable, but this and this and this could be done. It should be rather 5 or 6 than 7 or 8. So stay consistent within this year's competition. Even if you feel you are not consistent with the other jury members, that's fine. It's much better to stay consistent among yourself. We see it every year that during the physics fight, the first physics fight, the deviations are higher than afterwards, and this is not good. If you are a point lower than the others, that's fine. If you keep it through the whole competition, it's much more fair than if you change it after the first physics fight, because then only the teams you met during the first physics fight are punished. You will have also to fill out the guidelines. I spoke about the 5 points starting with ±3, ±1, ±1. So you can end up, in a very stupid case, you can end up with 5 -3 -1 -1 to 0. So anything which is below 1, just round it up to 1. There's no discussion about it. It won't happen in reality, that's the issue. So fill in partial grades, because the sheets will be collected, scanned, and made available via the web page, I hope. So any team can go back and search your grading and look up how did you came to the 8 for this stupid presentation they have seen, or at least they think that was completely stupid. And you should also use your partial grades in an explanation of your grading is dynamic. So in general, the procedure is that after the jury shows the grades, the lowest and the highest grade, if it's a single one, has to be explained. And it's very good if you use your partial grades as a part of your explanation. But even on top of that, it's a kind of fairness towards the students. If you are asked to discuss your grade on an honest manner, please reserve 1 or 2 minutes of your time for the students to explain how did you come to your conclusion. You can go have a coffee in between, but it's a fairness to the students. They are working hard through all the year. They end up with a grade they feel it's not nice for them. So you should somehow try to explain, also in a very honest manner, how did you came to the grade. And like I'm doing it always, I think that many students really appreciate it, because they're not really complaining about your grade. They just want to know how to do things better, how to become something better tomorrow or maybe next year. We have a few new chairs this year. We have like chairs repeating. And that's also a very important thing, that the chairs shall be consistent and even much more consistent than the jurors themselves. Because there's just one chair in every jury, and then sometimes it happens that the team meets one chair twice and so on. So we should have some kind of common rules. One of the rules is the timekeeping. There are always discussions how this time should be kept, and always complain that this chairman did allow the other team more presentation time, preparation time, whatever, and you don't want to allow me the same. If all of us keep the times very strict, then we keep it fair. Allow teamwork. IYPT is a team competition. It's very clear that only one person of the team speaks as a reporter, as the opponent, as the reviewer. But it doesn't mean, and it's also clearly stated in the regulations and in the guidelines, that short answers to short questions can be helped also by other team members. A very common situation is that you have someone who is presenting a solution with everything, but actually that's not the person who really done all the experiments by hand. So if there is a very specific question about the experimental setup, it's very clear that another member of the team can help with explanation of this. Passing of slips, it's very usual game that during the discussion there are coming slips with some hints from the teams. That's the usual procedure, and the team has to work to bring new ideas for the discussion. Another thing which we dealt with in Iran, and it came to the discussion, that every team has to state who from the team will be the reporter, the opponent, and the reviewer. That's for sure. But the time of this is by the beginning of the respective phase. So the opposing team has the right to choose the opponent after seeing the presentation. The same with the reviewer. And also important thing is, with the same tolerance as for the teams, you have to keep the jury question short and fair. So if you think the jury question is not correct, you can stop it. I don't know where all the chairs are now set, but if you feel it's not fine, just stop it. Or just ask the juror to rephrase the question. If you think it's too long, just shorten it. And so forth. Last but not least, to conclude, every one of us has his or her own view. And I have a nice picture of that. It's not really. This is Ilya, and this is Wolfgang. This is a number 9, and this is a number 2. And I knew both of these guys quite well. And I'm pretty sure Ilya had very good reasons to give his 9, and Wolfgang has had very good reasons to give his 4. And that's perfectly fine. If, and only if, both of them can explain how they came to their conclusions. And this is why we have more jurors in the jury. We just don't know 1 or 2. We have 5 or 6. 6, perfect. We have 6 jurors. And even on the top of that, the highest and lowest grade are just taken with half of the weight. So don't be afraid to go up. But we have to share common principles, and that's physics on the first stage, then understanding of the physics, and also novelty. Like not only explaining what was done before, but bringing something new, at least experiments and things like this. Thank you very much. I used 1 minute extra time, so I think it's good. Thank you very much. We have, before we have questions, we have the distribution of the jurors for the whole tournament. Whoa. But things do happen. There are many jurors here. The jurors might got ill. The jurors, there might be huge complaints on one of the jurors, such that we have to change the schedule and so on. So please, even if you know from this that you are of charge for a specific tournament, be sure to check closely before the physics 5 that you are not somewhere in there. So I will distribute it after we have the questions, I guess. Question answer.
Would just want to point out one more administrative remark. As Martin already said, you're supposed to fill out those scoring guidelines that we have, and they will be collected and scanned and made available to the participants. So since you can imagine, there will be a huge amount of paper that we will have to scan, so we have to do it automatically. And therefore, we kindly ask you not to bend or crumble or do this with these sheets, so that we can put them in a scanner and scan all of them automatically. So please be careful with these sheets. Try not to spill your coffee over them, or don't fold them up, because otherwise it will be a huge amount of work for us. Thank you for your understanding.
Yeah, that's very important. We had a question.
Sorry, Marcel, I missed the brainy competition, but you said, just to clarify, so it's not, I think this is a change. The students don't write the name at the start. Who's going to be the reporter? Who's going to be the opponent?
This is okay.
That's
the thing is, if they do that, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if they claim like we want to select the opponent, depending on what is the report about, it's their right. Like there is no rule to push the student to decide it before they have to stand up. Because we had the discussions in Iran, and I understand the position of the team. Like we have possible opponents there, and one of them is very good at math, but maybe has some other shortcomings, and the other one is, let's say, very good speaker and so on. And if we see, wow, that was a complicated mathematics, so let's just put them the math guy to discuss. But if it was just reasonable and so on, then we put the girl who's 9, whatever. thing is, like, we don't have anything in hand to push them to do it earlier. So if they do it in advance, which is most of the cases, 99.9, that's perfectly fine. And if they demand on setting up the opponent only at the moment when the question phase started, that's also like it's illegal.
So you could ask them to put their names up, but if they want to change it, they can.
Yeah.
I have a question about jury question.
Yeah.
Do you want them to only be clarifying sort of points and technical details, or do you want jurors to ask about theoretical concepts which weren't brought up by other people? Or
Okay, so that's not a question what I would like to have. It's more the question what the rule says, and the rule says it's a clarifying question, but it's a broad sense. So it might be clarifying of what was said, or it might be clarifying whether I think you understand what we are speaking about. So the strict limitation is the 15 seconds you have for placing a question. If it's a question where you need a minute to place it, then it's not an appropriate question. The second thing is it should allow for a clear and short answer within 30 seconds. So it's a question like, did you consider your flow turbulent or laminar? It's a perfectly valid question. But do you know about Strouhal's number and what would be the influence of the Strouhal's equation in your problem is not a valid question because it goes much beyond the... Normally the chairs do not really interfere at the moment when the question is placed, unless it's clearly inappropriate. But where I think the chair should interfere is if there is consecutive. If it was a question on the edge, there is some kind of answer on the question, which is, depending on the question, sometimes even completely stupid. And if there is another question from the same juror and there are other jurors trying to ask, then the chairman should really pass the over to someone else. Yeah.
Concerning opponent and reporter, you only mentioned the plus or minus 1. So grades would oscillate between 4 and 6.
Oh, sorry, the physics goes for all of them.
Okay, plus and minus 3, so we're still missing 1 point.
Presentation also goes for all.
No,
So
okay.
the first two categories.
Okay.
All right.
I thought you would have the scoring guidelines in your hand, then it would be easier. But just to repeat, like we start with 5, and then we get plus minus 3 points for reported opponent and reviewer. We got plus minus 1 point for reported opponent and reviewer, and we got plus minus 1 point depending on the position there. So and my feeling from the discussions with the jurors is the jurors are perfect with assigning the plus and minus points here, here, and here. But the discrepancies come from the fact what is the standard presentation for 5. Because it happens that we have like discrepancies, and one of the jurors said like, this was a nice experiment, and I gave plus 2 for the experiment, and there was the theory was completely wrong, so I gave minus 1 for the theory, so it was plus 5 plus 2 minus 1, which gives 6. And the other one says, okay, so the experiment, that was something I expected there, so it was 5, but the theory was completely wrong, so I give minus 2 for the theory, which ends up with 3. And both of them seem to be completely valid if you try to answer the student's question, but apparently there is a big discrepancy, and it comes from the fact what would you expect at the basis level. And it's very hard to solve this problem unless you are an experienced juror who has seen at least a few physics fights on the international level. Yes,
I'm sorry if I missed it in your speech. I think that a very principal thing is to explain the extreme marks, the lowest and the highest mark. And I should say that it should be necessary in all the juries.
okay.
Because it is very interesting to students, and sometimes they don't understand what is happening.
Okay,
As an example, with 4 and 9.
yeah, I'm sorry when I didn't express myself clear enough, but it's an obligation of every juror to explain the grade if it was highest or lowest single grade. That's an obligation, and it's a role of the chair to ask the juror. But what I said, even if there are more extreme grades, especially sometimes you have situations with 2 5s and 2 9s. So there is no obligation for explaining, but sometimes the students would like to know why the difference is so big. So even voluntarily, if you feel you have something to add, it's very good. And especially the chair, if it's somehow manageable, I would like to ask the chairs to try to give feedback for the students, because it's very important for them. They might go out with a low grade and still with good mood if they get reasonable feedback what was wrong.
If I can add one point, what we also did sometimes in the past, and what usually is a good practice for the chairmen, is that if they ask the captains of the teams, do you want any more explanations for the grades? So even after you have already justified the highest and the lowest grades, you can ask the teams, do you feel there is the need for more explanation? If the team asks, yes, please, this particular juror, could you explain your grade? Then be so kind and please do so. If the team says, no, it's fine, we basically understand the sentiment behind the grades, then there is no need to spend an awful lot of time on explaining, but you should give them the opportunity to say, we want an explanation for this particular grade or not. I think that would be the perfect way to do it.
That's perfect once you have time to do that. Like especially in the groups of 4, there might be a kind of time pressure.
Should we allow the teams to question only their marks for their own work or for work of any team?
If you feel that the grade for the report of another team was far too high, especially comparing to the grade of yours, you are fully free. I think this should be on. I forgot one thing, just to come back. Also, this is a rule of jurors. You should not discuss among yourself. This is for sure. But it should not also be treated like too rigorous, I would say. It should not be the discussion which is where you discuss and don't hear what's going there. So when someone is speaking or when there is a discussion running, you should really limit the discussion to a certain minimum. But it's fine if you miss or you just can't read because the things are too small. So like asking your neighbor, so do you see what's on the axis of the graph? And the neighbor answers you, yes, that's the velocity. That's more or less fine. And during the breaks when the students prepare, like you should not really discuss what points and so on, but like especially asking what was there if you couldn't get it. If it's not too extensive, it's somehow acceptable. And especially like being a chair very often, I would say, the chair has much more things to do, like catching the time and things like that. And then it's very easy that something flies away that you can't catch it. So please allow the chairman like short questions, asking like what exactly did he say or whatever. It's not because we want to influence anyone, but we are trying to get what was said with the strong music. Yep.
Just one minor observational point over the years. I've seen jurors sometimes judge based on their knowledge of the problem, their intimate knowledge of the problem, and their world is everything, and yet the opposition didn't quite oppose it in the way that they view it, and the problem has been marked down dramatically. And really, the opposition needs to show the physics to be wanting, not the juror's expert knowledge. And sometimes the juror is wrong as well. So it's up to the opposition to pull the holes in the physics, find the flaws, and that's what you really, I think, should be looking at.
Okay, I can subscribe to this one definitely. Of course, we have jurors that are specialists in certain fields, and we have jurors their field is the whole world, and I feel this problem, but it's very hard to fight it. So we can only appeal on the jurors. So please allow interpretation of the problem if it's reasonable. So even if you feel the problem goes one direction, if the team decided to go a little bit other direction, if it's within the scope of the problem, if they proved to come with a 12-minute presentation about reasonable things, and they didn't touch what you expected to be touching the problem, it still can be a very good presentation. So,
Can you remind the policy on taking photos and videos so that we use this policy uniformly across all rooms?
Yes, I can. Maybe you remember better.
I think last year it was that each team which is present in the room or someone affiliated with the team can take footage of all physics flight, but they are discouraged from sharing it unless the IYPT is over.
That's the regulation.
That's the regulation. So in general, we don't want other teams to come with their observers or visitors to make a film shooting of the other team and just use the material for upgrading their presentation. But we want to allow the team to have a full video of their whole physics file. So if someone is presenting, they are free to make a video of the whole physics file. That's fine. If someone is opposing or reviewing, they can make the video of the phase. So this is the opposition and the discussion. This is our review. That's also fine. But they are discouraged to share. We can't check it. We won't check it.
It's
But
a bit
it should
different
not
from what I
be all
expected.
that the Austrian team now comes with a camera. They make recordings of what
Well,
was
the
done,
difference is
and
that
then they come to
Martin
us
says
and
that
they
you're
give
allowed
us
to take the whole stage
CD
only
and
if
they
you are
give
a
us
reporter.
the review.
But if you are the opponent, you can't take the...
No.
Martin, I'm sorry, could you repeat it again? If the team is the reporter, they can take the whole stage.
Yes.
If they are the opponent, they can take only the opposition.
Yes.
No.
Are you sure?
No.
I think it's...
No.
I think any...
Any team that is present in the
Okay.
fight can film the entire fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
They should not share these recordings with anyone before the end of the tournament. So because they are
Okay.
present, they see everything, so there is no need to not allow them to record it.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't share it with anyone who is not present. And the only exception to this rule basically is that there is one official film crew by the organizing committee. We're doing a documentary on this IYPT, and of course, if they come in with their equipment, they're of course allowed to film. They will not share this with anyone before this tournament is over anyway, so don't be confused if somebody with a large camera just enters and takes a swoop through the room. There are official cameramen at work. Maybe you've already seen them at the opening ceremony, so this is of course agreed that they keep this material confidential until the end of the tournament, and they do this
Yes.
basically for us because we can use this as an advertisement in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, so the criteria is the large, is the...
If you look official enough, then
No, like we also had kinds of problems that observers from other teams were coming. They are not filming, but they are really just writing down every single formula which was there. And we had complaints of the other teams why he or she is coming and writing everything down. But still, I feel like most of the teams have their presentation prepared to such an extent that it doesn't really help. If I send someone for the physics file in the afternoon and he brings even new ideas, it's almost impossible to rewrite your presentation in a way that you can really improve it till tomorrow in the morning. So we are trying to be, let's say, more relaxed, but we also discourage if you have your observers here, if they want to go and see other fights, that's perfectly fine. But it should not be completely apparent that they sit there and write down every single word which was said, and then run and report it to the team. So I think it doesn't really help, but it makes a bad impression or whatever. So you might speak with your observers that this is something that some teams feel not really good.
Okay, just one little remark. I don't think this is the official policy, but just a general suggestion. When the IYPT is over, I think it's good if we share these videos on YouTube, because this improves visibility of the IYPT and can help as a historical record in the future. So